Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more small game slash upland patterning, I guess. We've got a new shell and a new shotgun that we've never tested on the channel before. So I'm definitely excited to see what this combo can actually do, since it's definitely a pretty interesting one. But for the shells I've got out here today, big thank you to Salt Creek for sending some of these over. I'm not paid or sponsored by them or anything like that, but they do make good shells. And the shells we've got today are some of these. They're not in any kind of fancy packaging, but these are some 12 gauge, 2.5 inch, 1 ounce load of bismuth number 7s going about 1200 feet per second. So very interesting loading with these being a 2.5 inch bismuth 7. When I got these and saw these, they pretty much gave me the feeling of old school fancy shotgun, upland bird hunting, maybe rabbit hunting or something with a real fancy break action over under or double barrel or something. And since they are bismuth 7s, they're gonna perform ballistically pretty similar to what a lead 7.5 can do. So if you were to use a lead 7.5 for doves or quail or rabbits or whatever the case would be, these are a pretty perfect option for you as well. So definitely a pretty interesting shell that kind of made me feel like we have to bring out this shotgun for today. So as for that shotgun I've brought out here today, I got out this guy. This is a Beretta Sliver Pigeon, the sporting model, 29.5 inch barrels, and currently we have an improved cylinder and a modified choke in the gun. Now this is not my shotgun. I borrowed this from my brother who uses it for dove hunting, and if you know anything about me, I am not a fancy guy. This shotgun is not even scratching the surface of fancy upland, double barrel or over under break shotguns or anything like that. But for me, this is a fancy shotgun, and it's definitely nice, don't get me wrong. But with what those shells reminded me of, I had to go and see if I could track down this guy to borrow it for a video. So definitely a very nice, very interesting shotgun combo, and we're gonna see what this can actually do with these 2.5 inch bismuth 7s. Is this an old school setup to run those 2.5 inch shells? No, it's definitely a modern type of setup, but it kind of gets us into that realm of high class, fancy shotgun type of upland hunting setup here, that's for sure. So we'll see what it can do. So as for the test today, with the limited amount of shells I have and some other things I want to do with them, and with me not having a bunch of different chokes and things like that, it might not be a perfect thing, but I think I want to take a shot through the improved cylinder at 30 yards and another shot through the modified choke at 40 yards, and we'll kind of get an idea of how these actually perform through a couple different choke constrictions at a couple different ranges. Since I think that 30 yard with an improved cylinder and 40 yard with a mod choke is a pretty decent distance to start with here, and it'll at least give us an idea of what they could do in a dove hunt or something like that. We're not going to have any super fancy targets, but we'll go down there and count all of our pellets and draw our circles and things like that and get an idea of what kind of a pattern we can actually get. And of course I have the chronograph and stuff out here today as well, so we can get our velocity from them. But enough talking, let's go over here. We'll start with the improved cylinder choke at 30 yards, then we'll move to the modified choke at 40 yards and just see what kind of a pattern we can get. All right, so let's take a quick peek at our velocity here real quick. Our first shot, which was through the modified barrel, gave us 1179. Their claim is 1200, so we are pretty much right there at it. And our second shot through the improved cylinder barrel was 1187. So yeah, we're dancing just under that 1200 mark. And I think with the setup that we've got, that is pretty realistic. So looking pretty good and pretty consistent up here when it comes to our velocity numbers. But what kind of patterns were we able to get at 30 and 40 yards through that Sliver Pigeon? Let's go check it out and see what we got. All right, so now we're down here at our targets, and I went ahead and counted some pellets and drew some circles and stuff on here so we can get an idea of how these actually pattern. So we'll start off with the first shot we took, which is the target on your right, which was at 40 yards with the modified choke barrel. And here's what we got. Now I went ahead and drew a 10-inch circle and a 30-inch circle. I tried to line it up with the pretty much center area of our pattern, and within a 10-inch circle, we had 13 pellets right there, and backing out to the 30-inch circle, we had 116 pellets with inside that. And of course, we had a bunch of them scattered outside of that 30-inch circle as well. Now, I gotta say, that is a pretty evenly spread pattern across the board. And really kind of the only almost sort of void I see is kind of right in that core area. I definitely would have liked to seen a couple more pellets right in that 10-inch circle. But looking at the rest of the pattern, it's definitely a pretty nice and even spread. And at 40 yards, I think that is pretty much the max distance for what you would want to shoot these shells for anyway. And I think that a modified choke is probably about the lowest constriction that I would want to be at 40 as well. That is a very usable pattern for rabbits or dove or quail or anything. Now for those doves or quail that might be a little bit on the smaller side, there might be a little gap or something in there that they might be able to squeak through. But for the most part, I think you've pretty well got them covered. And that pattern's going to give you a nice bit of leeway up, down, left, and right. And you should be able to get it done pretty nice with that kind of a pattern. So definitely off to a good start at 40 yards with the modified choke here. So let's move over to our other target and take a look at that. All right, and here's the 30-yard pattern through the improved cylinder choke. And I gotta say, this is beautiful. Now, as far as the overall size of the pattern goes, I think we're probably roughly about the same. We have the vast majority of the paper covered, but I do think it's a little bit hotter and more condensed than the 40-yard mod choke pattern was. Now, I figured moving this into 30 yards is probably a pretty realistic distance for these shells, and they do seem to really like an improved cylinder at that kind of a range, it would seem, because we had 33 pellets right within our 10-inch core circle and 156 within the 30-inch circle, and I don't really see any kind of noticeable voids or anything in there. So I think that this combo at 30 yards is probably about perfect for what you would want. Gives you a very nice amount of leeway, and there's not a void in there that something like a dove or rabbit or quail or anything like that's going to get through. That's going to absolutely get it done. That is a beautiful looking pattern. So yeah, I don't have a single complaint about that one bit. Anything that I would ever use a lead 7.5 shot for, I wouldn't question to use this on it either. So yeah, that is a pretty well perfect pattern. So overall here, I think I like the 30-yard pattern just a touch more, but these are a vintage style 2.5-inch bismuth number 7 shell, and I think 30 to 35 yards is probably about where you want to be with them. So I'm really liking that combination, and I wouldn't hesitate to take that out on a hunt all day long. Okay, and here's the wad from one of those shells, and it's definitely a pretty interesting design. You've got a big old gas cushion piece right back here on the back of it, and you can see all the little dimples from where those pellets were sitting, but there's no damage on here. Everything looks pretty well perfect. Definitely nothing too odd to take note of on this one, and clearly I think it did about as good as what you could ask it to do. So definitely a pretty interesting wad, but it seems to work out pretty nicely for these shells, I'd say. All right, y'all. Well, what did you think about those patterns right there? I would call it pretty nice. I mean, that is a 2.5-inch bismuth 7 going through pretty open chokes at the end of the day. I mean, that 30-yard improved cylinder pattern over there is absolutely beautiful looking. I wouldn't hesitate to take this combo out after some rabbits or some doves or anything like that. So I think we've got a pretty good combination on our hands here, that's for sure. That 30-yard range seems to really kind of be the ticket that they really like, and you can still reach out to about 40 yards and probably knock down what you're shooting at. So yeah, I'm definitely a fan of what we were seeing here today, that's for sure. I mean, that 30-yard pattern, you can't really argue too much with that for wing shooting. So I guess let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of Salt Creek's bismuth shells or a bismuth number 7 in general? And if so, what kind of results have you seen out of it? Would you hunt with this combo if it gave you these kind of patterns? And if so, what would you hunt with it? And is there another combo or setup or anything like that that you want to see these bismuth 7 Salt Creek shells shot through? Let me know all that down below. At the end of the day, we've got a beautiful shotgun and a shell that can give us patterns like this. That's going to be a pretty nice combination to carry out upland hunting with you, that's for sure. I wouldn't have any issues taking that out on a hunt. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys today, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like to. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.